Good evening, everyone. I am not doing another auction announcement. I'll actually start this time. Thank you for coming. It is my pleasure to welcome you to Broomfield Library's One Book, One Broomfield program. I am Abby Yellman, Director of Library Services and Cultural Affairs for the City and County of Broomfield. Thank you all for coming. One Book, One Broomfield is a community-wide program in which success relies on the contributions of many. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge those people that helped make this year's program possible. The One Book Steering Committee, which consisted of Broomfield Mayor Randy Ahrens, Jan Kardatsky, who is on our library board, Laurel Singleton, Broomfield Library Friends Foundation, Carrie Pettis, Broomfield Enterprise Bookwoman columnist, Irene Roberts, community member, Roseanne Dorn, community member, Jason McKinney, community member and Broomfield Enterprise columnist, guest columnist, Iva Osborne, community member, Linda Rodriguez, community member, Beverly Thompson, community member, Kathleen Ussery, I hope I got that right, Kathleen, community member, Gigi Young, library staff, Elaine Mason, library staff, Wendy Norris, library staff, and Jackie Anley Conley, museum manager. So thank you to all of them on the Broomfield. Let's give them a hand. We couldn't do this without other partners that we also need to recognize tonight that help make this possible through partnership and marketing and promotion. So I got to give a shout out to the Broomfield Enterprise, KCCB Channel 8, the Broomfield Library Friends Foundation, Omni Resorts at Interlochen, Broomfield Auditorium, thank you Chris and Amy Edel, Library and Cultural Affairs staff, which I could list them all, there are many. They do a tremendous amount of work to get those books circulating during the year. City and County of Broomfield staff, and also all of our volunteers who have assisted with this year's program. Let's give them a hand. Following tonight's presentation, there will be time for questions as well as a book signing to follow out in the gallery. I am now honored to introduce Mayor Randy Ahrens, who will say a few words and introduce our guest author. Thank you.
Good evening. Okay, we're going to try that again. And we'll keep going until you get it right. Good evening. Good evening. All righty. You know, as mayor, and on behalf of City, County, and Broomfield, I welcome you to this 12th One Book selection. The 2017 selection, everybody knows, is Dark Matter by Blake Couch. A suspenseful science fiction thriller about life choices and the road not taken that also introduces the possibilities of quantum mechanics and parallel universe. It actually struck a personal chord with me as I pondered some of those unanswerable questions pertaining to the various paths that we've all chosen. What if we had gone to a different college? What if I had taken a different job? What if I had turned down that promotion? What if I didn't ask that special someone out? What if they turned me down? Those quantum mechanics are explored in this book. Occasionally, I get that deja vu moment. I had one actually the other day, and you got to take a step back. And when I get those deja vu moments, I hope I'm on the right course. I hope there's an intersection that I'm actually going the right way. And, you know, the other possibility is when you have those deja vu moments is maybe you're coming up to one of those crosswords, maybe one of those doors you're about to enter. Blake Crouch is a best-selling novelist and screenwriter. His internationally best-selling Wayward Pines trilogy was adapted into a television series on Fox, a show that I actually watched and thoroughly enjoyed. Blake is a co-creator of the TNT Good Behavior, based on his Leslie Dohash novellas. He has written over a dozen novels that have been translated into more than 30 languages, and his books have sold over 2 million copies. Blake lives in Colorado with his family, and we are thrilled to have Blake Crouch with us. I am pleased to present this year's selection, Dark Matter author Blake Crouch.
How are we doing tonight? Thanks so much for coming out. I would love to add my thanks to that impressive list of people who helped make this event possible. And a huge thank you to each and every one of you. It's a huge honor to have Dark Matter chosen for One Book, One Broomfield. It made doubly special because this is my home state. As you may have caught on, I'm Blake Crouch. I live in Durango, Colorado, and have been there since 2003. In fact, I moved to Colorado sight unseen out of college, literally picking Durango off a map. I got lucky. It's a great place to write, it's a great place to live, and I just love the West. And there's just something special about these Western communities. Before I get going, I just want to say it was in the Iredell County Public Library in North Carolina when I was 10 years old that I discovered The Lord of the Rings and The Hardy Boys, Time and Again, A Wrinkle in Time, The Chronicles of Narnia, all these hugely important, formative books that influenced the writer I would become. And I came from a lower middle class family, and I would have had the opportunity to discover these books without libraries. And if I hadn't discovered these books, I might not be a writer. It was truly the libraries of my youth that made it possible for me to be standing here today. And it's libraries like this one in Broomfield that will inspire the next generation. Oh, thank you. So, writing for me it's not just a vocation, it's this vital portal into understanding myself and the world around me. The writer I am and I've become is also the story of the person I've become, but a little more on that later. You all came to hear about Dark Matter, and before I say anything about that book, it's really important to understand how I came to the place in my life where I needed to write that book, and how the process of writing this story actually saved me. My earliest writing memories begin when I'm 10 or 11 years old. I have a younger brother named Jordan, and we shared a room, as many brothers do. And at bedtime, he would have trouble falling to sleep, and he would ask me, "Tell me a story." And so I made up my first ever world, and I placed it in a story called The Castle on the Hill. It was about two brothers who lived in a neighborhood much like ours, only there was this towering mountain overlooking all the houses with a menacing castle on top. And in this castle lived a mad scientist who kidnapped the little brother one night during a thunderstorm when most scary things tend to happen. And the older brother, me, had to go save the little brother from this mad scientist who basically just chased them around the castle corridors the entire time, saying things like, "I'm coming to get you." It was very scary. And I remember loving the reaction I got from my little brother at the time, the idea that a story I was telling could evoke such genuine fear and excitement. Sometimes Jordan would pull the cover over his eyes, but he would still beg me to tell the story. You have to finish it. The Castle on the Hill was the first story I ever put to paper on a Tandy 1000, which makes my brother my first audience, and even today, he's usually one of the first people I share my works in progress with. And as an aside, my brother's getting a tattoo this Christmas. It's his first. And the last line of that story is going to be on his forearm, and it will read, "Jonas explained to everybody what had happened, but they treated it like everything else told them about the castle on the hill, a legend." When I was 12, I got in trouble a lot. I mean, a lot, which meant I was grounded a lot. And the only thing I was allowed to do when I was grounded was write. Now, this was the early 90s, and we were coming up on a decade since the return of the Jedi. So there was this pervasive feeling that we would never see Star Wars again. I found this unbelievably depressing. If I had only knew what I know now. So I started writing a Star Wars novel for the first, just for something to do when I was grounded. And it was called The Last Strike. It picked up 30 years after the events of Jedi, and I am not going to lie to you, it was definitely better than episodes 1 and 2. And then, so this tragic thing happened, which is my mom accidentally deleted my Star Wars novel off of the Tandy 1000, and I was devastated. But as I was going through this aforementioned rebellious time, it wasn't long before I was grounded again, and I just rewrote the story. And this was an important moment in my development as a writer because it was my first experience of the horror of rewriting. I mean, deleting my work and making me do it again is basically what editors do for me now, anyway. As an aside, my mom still doesn't really understand how computers work. And she's not allowed near my office. In middle school, I wrote a story for a class assignment called In Shock. Long story short, it was about a guy who commits suicide. So that got a prompt parent-teacher conference. I was enrolled in a very conservative school in the most hardcore buckle of the North Carolina Bible Belt. Needless to say, this was all poised to go very badly. But my teacher, Miss Bumgarner, wonderful 8th grade teacher, once we all sat down, just wanted to make sure I was okay. She wanted to make sure things were safe at home. And once she realized everything was cool, she did something I never expected, something that terrified me. She made me stand up and read a story to the class. It was my first public reading. I was mortified, but also exhilarated. Instead of just my brother, I got to disturb an entire classroom of my peers. And when I got the graded paper back, Ms. Bumgarner had written in the front page, "Always keep writing." That hangs in my office. My high school writing consisted of volumes of poetry, which I'll be torturing you later with. But seriously, I was almost going to leave out any mention of poetry. But it strikes me that this time in my life as a writer was important because as bad as that poetry was, I was using it as a conduit for expression, for examining my thoughts and feelings on how I saw the world. And this would come in handy later with dark matter. This is my first dabbling in what I do now, which is writing a self-examination. Also, by the end of high school, I had started my first novel. Not one, thankfully, any of you would have ever heard of. In college, that novel, dramatically entitled Down from the Sleeping Trees, was rejected everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Hundreds of thank you, but letters rolled into my house, and I started taping the rejections to the wall as this badge of honor. And then I ran out of wall. And it just made me sad to look at it, so I took them down. But I still have those rejections. So I started writing a new book, which some of you may have read, called Desert Places. And I was fortunate enough to work with a very supportive creative writing professor named Bland Simpson, who taught me the value of seeking editorial advice. That book got me an agent. That book got me published. It was a thriller with some pretty horrific undertones, I'm not going to lie. It was around this time that I moved from North Carolina to Colorado. And I kept writing these horror novels, which came out without too much fanfare. No one book, one Broomfield books in that lot. And here was the problem. And this epiphany dramatically steered me towards writing dark matter. I wasn't writing about myself. I wasn't writing about real life. The plots were cool, the villains were villainy, but I wasn't really putting myself on the page. That was about to change. On a book tour for one of those novels, this was 2005, I found myself in Bisbee, Arizona, with a lot of time on my hands. If you have been to Bisbee or on a book tour, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I was trying to figure out what I should write next. There was this book I wanted to do, but it scared me. It was a bigger idea than anything I'd ever attempted. I decided, who cares? My career isn't exactly lighting the literary world on fire. Life's too short. What's the worst that can happen? Write what you want to write. I told myself all this self-help nonsense and then started in on Abandon, the first novel that I was and am truly proud of. It's my most Colorado book, so I want to tell you a little about it. Here's the pitch. On Christmas Day in 1893, every man, woman, and child in a remote gold mining town disappears. Belongings forsaken, meals left to freeze in vacant cabins, and not a single bone is ever found. 116 years later, two backcountry guides are hired by a history professor and his journalist daughter to lead them to the abandoned mining town so they can learn what happened. Recently, a similar party had attempted to explore the town and was never heard from again. Now the area is believed to be haunted. This crew is about to discover, 20 miles from civilization with a blizzard bearing down, that they are not alone and the past is very much alive. So here's why Abandon was such an important book for me. There's a scene where one of the characters is thinking about the loss of his 3-year-old son. And while I was working on it, it was the first time I ever cried while I was writing. I was a new parent at the time. and I was writing in a roundabout way about my fears as a father. It was the first time since those tortured high school poems that I was writing about something I was experiencing. And it came straight from the heart, and I think readers could tell. And so, having written a novel that required tons of research and revealed a little about myself and of my fears, I got a bit closer, one step closer to writing Dark Matter. My next novel, Run, was about a family escaping an American genocide, fleeing from Albuquerque through Colorado into southern Canada. I burned Durango to the ground in that book. They were not thrilled. My stories were becoming more emotional, more human. I had 2 kids at this point, and being a parent was adding a depth to my writing that hadn't been there before. In 2010, I met up with a writing friend named Marcus Saiki, and we went on a backpacking trip in the San Juan Mountains with the ostensible purpose of brainstorming our next books. It took us exactly 12 hours of backpacking and attempting to sleep on a rocky slope for us to realize this brainstorming session would be much more rewarding in hot springs with martinis and steaks in Ouray, which was helpfully a short drive from our campsite. So we decamped, started brainstorming, kicking ideas back and forth, and I came to this realization that I had been writing small books. Now, there were some big ideas, like Abandon, but nothing on the scale I wanted to be working in. And I asked myself, well, what is stopping me? Fear. I wanted to create the kinds of stories that got made into movies, that millions of people wanted to read, that could connect with a massive audience. So I let go of the fear of striking out at the World Series, and I decided to take a big swing. The book I brainstormed on that trip was the first novel in the Wayward Pines trilogy, which became my breakout novel, which became a hit TV show on Fox, which changed my life. And the experience of working on Wayward Pines, the TV show, opened my eyes in a major way. I was getting to experience things, new collaborations, like my ongoing TV writing partnership with Chad Hodge, talking to actors like Matt Dillon and explaining why my character does and says the things that they do, talking with directors like M. Night Shyamalan, who have created bigger worlds than I have, and other writers. I saw the impact a big idea could have, and I was working with people who saw my stories and the world differently than me. It didn't just affect my writing, it affected the way I saw myself, the way I saw the world. And this would all have a critical impact on how I decided to approach my next novel, Dark Matter. So, if you haven't gotten a chance to read Dark Matter, or if it's been a minute since you have, here's the premise. A brilliant physicist named Jason Desson is living in Chicago with his wife Daniela and son Charlie. He is a true genius. And while there was a point in his late 20s when his research could have made him a star in the field, recognition, money, awards, instead he fell in love and chose a family-focused life. Jason is happy with his family and life. He chose well, but that doesn't stop him from wondering what could have been. It doesn't stop him from being a little jealous of his more successful colleagues. I've been there. One night, while walking home, he's abducted by a mysterious, masked man and injected with a drug. And when he next awakes, his world has completely changed. He's no longer married, he doesn't have a son, and has achieved professional success beyond his wildest dreams. This sets him on a thrilling, mysterious, and at times terrifying journey to learn what has happened to him and to find his way home to the people and the life he loves. Dark Matter has been 10 years in the making for me, and the inspiration was the idea of quantum mechanics itself. This field of physics is brimming with mystery and fundamental questions about existence and choices and the idea of the path not taken. It's so much more than the study of subatomic particle behavior. But quantum mechanics is confusing and dense. It took me a long, long time to figure a way out that wouldn't bog down in the science or become off-putting to readers who don't consider themselves sci-fi fans. Because no matter what, I wanted Dark Matter to be a book for everyone. And now I have to say something about quantum physics. Please don't fall asleep. Here's the thing. I wrote this book, so if you've never heard of quantum mechanics, it wouldn't matter. But quantum mechanics says something unbelievably profound about the universe we live in. This area of physics generally pertains to how particles behave at the subatomic level. They appear to do insanely counterintuitive things like exist in different places at the same time, in what appears to be multiple realities. And maybe the behavior of subatomic particles doesn't matter in our day-to-day lives. But when you scale the ramifications of quantum mechanics up to the macro world, to our world, it changes everything. There's a theory called the many worlds interpretation, and it goes something like this. Some physicists think that every thought we have, every action we take, every choice we could possibly make creates a new world. For instance, in a different reality, instead of coming to one book, one Broomfield, you did something infinitely less interesting and rewarding. Or maybe you got lost trying to get here and never made it. Maybe you found yourself in a box staring at your alternate self. Or the greatest tragedy of all, maybe you never ended up reading dark matter. This many worlds theory says that those other realities not only exist, but they're just as real as the one we're experiencing together in this moment, in this room. Which means we're a part of a much larger and more mysterious reality than we ever dreamed of. And these other worlds, they're all around us, microns away from the surface of our skin, but just wrapped up in these other dimensions and interconnected by a matrix of choices, of our choices. As crazy as it sounds, it's absolutely possible that there could be other Blakes, other yous out there living in alternate realities with different careers, spouses, children. The questions these ideas raised are what made me want to write Dark Matter. I attempted to keep this book grounded in very real scientific theory and principle, quantum mechanics, superposition, Schrödinger's cat. I am definitely not a physicist. In fact, I took as few science and math courses as I possibly could on my way to a solidly unscientific English degree at UNC Chapel Hill. If the science is understandable to a lay audience, it's because I am the definition of a lay audience. I get asked a lot how I educated myself on this branch of science. To prepare, I read a ton of books on the subject and pulled out the elements of quantum mechanics that intrigued me and that I could actually comprehend. One of the most fascinating things I stumbled across was a TED Talk by Aaron O'Connell entitled Making Sense of a Visible Quantum Object. And don't let the title scare you. Unlike most material in quantum mechanics, which focuses on subatomic matter and can feel very abstract, O'Connell's talk is about how quantum mechanics might actually be at work at the macro level, at our level, and what that might imply about the world around us. His presentation, which is short and easily findable, is totally worth viewing, and it's on YouTube. So remember when I said that working on Desert Places taught me the value of working with others to edit, and the show Wayward Pines taught me how to be more truly collaborative. Well, when Dark Matter was done, I hired a brilliant professor at USC named Clifford Johnson to read the manuscript and make sure I hadn't gone too far off the rails. This is speculative fiction. It doesn't have to be perfect science, but I wanted to make sure that the core concepts I was presenting were accurate. A lot of my fans ask me about setting the story in Chicago, if there was any personal significance. And I know you guys had an architectural Chicago talk here, which is very cool. Yes, actually, I broke the story Dark Matter while I was in Chicago. See, for the last decade, I had wanted to write a story that hinges on quantum mechanics. I tried several times to write a version of Dark Matter. These three storylines had kept teasing me, and I had tried and failed spectacularly to write each of them separately. One storyline involved the box, another involved the idea of meeting yourself, and the last was about a man being hopelessly lost in time. While I was in Chicago, I was working each of these ideas separately when it occurred to me that they're all part of the same story. And they suddenly just clicked together like puzzle pieces, and I was off and running. And this all happened, by the way, at this amazing bar in Logan Square called Longman and Eagle, which has a very cool cameo in the book. Something about the vibe of those northern Chicago neighborhoods in Lake Michigan and that familiar skyline really carried the spirit of this novel. So it was never a question of where this story was going to be set. To be honest with you, I had a lot of fear about writing this book. The science, the scope, but most of all, the personal crossroads it represented for me, which I'll return to in a moment. But first, I would love to read an excerpt for you from my old high school poetry journal. Just kidding, it's from Dark Matter. There's a moment of actual terrified silence in the audience. It was very weird trying to find a section to read on the plane today, and I mean, like, nobody recognizes writers, but that would be really embarrassing to get caught reading your own book. I leaned back against the trunk of, let me preface this. And in this moment, Jason Desson is firmly in the multiverse and beginning to experience how thought and intention creates world. I lean back against the trunk of a pine tree, a notebook resting on my knees, my thoughts teeming. What a strange thing to consider imagining a world into being with nothing but words, intention, and desire. It's a troubling paradox. I have total control, but only to the extent I have control over myself, my emotions, my inner storm, the secret engines that drive me. If there are infinite worlds, how do I find one that is uniquely, specifically mine? I stare at the page and begin to write down every detail of my Chicago that comes to mind. I paint my life with words, the sound of the children in my neighborhood walking to school together, their voices like a stream flowing over rocks, high and burbling. Graffiti on the faded white brick of a building 3 blocks from my house that was so artfully done it was never painted over. I meditate on the intricacies of my home, the 4th step on the staircase that always creaks, the downstairs bathroom with the leaky faucet, the way my kitchen smells as coffee brews first thing in the morning, all the tiny, seemingly insignificant details upon which my world hangs. In the morning, Amanda is no longer beside me. I lie on my side watching the sunlight push through the blinds, listening to the noise of traffic humming through the walls. The clock is behind me on the bedside table. I can't see the time, but it feels late. We've slept in. I sit up, throw back the covers, look over at Amanda's bed. It's empty. Amanda? I start quickly toward the bathroom to see if she's in there. But what I see on top of the dresser makes me stop. Some cash, a few coins, 8 ampules, and a piece of paper ripped out of a notebook covered in Amanda's handwriting. It says, Jason, after last night, it was clear to me that you've made a decision to go down a path I can't follow. I struggled with this all night. As your friend, as a therapist, I want to help you. I want you to fix it. But I can't. And I can't keep watching you fall down, especially if I'm part of the reason you keep falling down. To what extent is our collective subconscious driving our connection to these worlds? It's not that I don't want you to get back to your wife. I want nothing more. But we've been together now for weeks. It's hard not to get attached, especially under these circumstances, when you're all I have. I read your notebooks yesterday when I was wondering if you'd left me, and honey, you're missing the point. You're writing down all these things about your Chicago, but not what you feel. I've left you the backpack, half the ampules, and half the money, a whopping $161 and change. I don't know where I'll end up. I'm curious and scared, but excited too. There's a part of me that really wants to stay, but you need to choose your own next door to open. So do I. Jason, I wish you nothing but happiness. Be safe. Amanda. Ampules remaining, 7. By myself, full horror of the corridor sinks in. I have never felt so alone. There's no Daniela in this world. Chicago feels wrong without her. I hate everything about it. The color of the sky seems off. The familiar buildings mock me. Even the air tastes like a lie, because it isn't my city, it's ours. Ampules remaining, 6. I'm striking out. All night I walk the streets alone, dazed, afraid, letting my system purge the drug. I eat at an all-night diner and ride the train back to the south side at dawn. On my way to the abandoned power plant, 3 teenagers see me. They're on the other side of the road, but at this hour the streets are empty. They call out to me, taunts and slurs. I ignore them, walk faster, but I know I'm in trouble when they start across the street, purposefully moving in my direction. For a moment I consider running, but they're young and no doubt faster. Besides, it occurs to me as my mouth runs dry and the fight-or-flight response kicks in, initial dump of adrenaline into my system that I may need my strength. On the outskirts of a neighborhood where the row houses and a train yard begins, they catch up to me. There's no one else at this hour. No help in sight. They're even younger than I first thought, and the smell of malt liquor wafts off them like a malicious cologne. The ragged energy they carry in their eyes suggests they've been out all night, perhaps searching for this exact opportunity. The beating begins in earnest. I'm too tired to even try to fight back. Before I know what's happening, I'm down on the pavement, getting kicked in the stomach, the back, the face. I black out for a moment, and when I come to, I can feel their hands running up and down my body, searching, I assume, for a wallet that isn't there. They finally rip my backpack away, and as I bleed on the pavement, take off laughing down the street. Ampules remaining too. I spend the first half day begging on a South Side street corner for enough money to catch a train into the city. I spend the rest of it, 4 blocks from my brownstone, sitting on the pavement behind a cardboard sign that reads, "Homeless, desperate. Anything helps." I walk to my house and head around the block to the alley, thinking of a place where I might sleep, undisturbed, undetected. There's a space between my garage and the neighbors that's hidden behind the trash can and recycling bin. I crawl between them, taking with me a flattened box, which I lean against the wall of my garage. Underneath it, I listen to the rain pattering on the cardboard above my head, hoping my makeshift shelter will last the night. From my vantage point, I can see over the high fence that encircles my backyard, through a window, into the second floor of my house. It's the master bedroom. Another Jason walks past. It isn't Jason 2. I know for a fact this isn't my world. The stores and restaurants down the block from my house are wrong. These Dessons own different cars than my family, and he's heavier than I've ever been. Daniela appears for a moment in the window, reaches up, pulls the blinds. "Good night, my love." The rain intensifies. The box sags. I begin to shiver. One night I pass a liquor store and realize I have enough money for a bottle of something. I drink an entire pint of J&B, find myself standing in the master bedroom of 44 Eleanor Street, staring down at Jason and Daniela, asleep in their bed under a tangle of blankets. The bedside table clock shows 3:38 a.m., and though the house is dead silent, I'm so drunk I can feel my pulse beating against my eardrum. I can't piece together the thought process that brought me here. All I can think is this. Once upon a time, I had this beautiful dream of a life. And in this moment, with the room spinning and tears streaking down my face, I actually don't know if that life of mine was real or imagined. I take a step toward Jason's side of the bed, my eyes beginning to adjust in the darkness. He sleeps peacefully. I want what's his so badly I can taste it. I'd do anything to have his life, to step into his shoes. I imagine killing him, choking the life out of him, or shooting a bullet into his brain. I see myself trying to be him, trying to accept this version of Daniela as my wife. This Charlie is my son. Would this house ever feel like mine? Could I sleep at night? Could I ever look Daniela in the eyes and not think about the fear in her real husband's face 2 seconds before I took his life? No. Clarity comes crashing, painful, shameful, but in the exact moment when it's so desperately needed. The guilt and all the tiny differences would transform my life here into hell, into a reminder not just of what I'd done, but of what I still didn't have. This would never feel like my world. I'm not capable of this. I don't want this. I am not this man. I check into a motel, throw my old clothes away, and take the longest shower of my life. The water running off my body is gray. Standing in the front mirror, I look almost like myself again, though my cheekbones stand out with more prominence from malnutrition. I sleep into the late afternoon and then train down to the south side. The power plant is quiet, sunlight slanting through the windows of the generator room. Sitting in the doorway of the box, I open the notebook. I've been thinking ever since I woke up about what Amanda said in her goodbye note, how I haven't really written about how I feel. Here goes. I'm 27 years old. I've worked all morning at the lab, and things are going so well I almost shrug off the party. I've been doing that a lot lately, neglecting friends and social engagements to steal just a few more hours of the clean room. I first notice you in the far corner of the small backyard as I stand on the deck, sipping a Corona and lime, my thoughts still back at the lab. I think it's the way you're standing that catches my attention, boxed in by a tall, lanky guy in tight black jeans who I recognize from this circle of friends. He's an artist or something. I don't even know his name, only that my friend Kyle has said to me recently, "Oh, that guy screws everyone." I can't explain it, even to this day, but as I watch him chatting up this dark-haired, dark-eyed woman in a cobalt blue dress, a flash of jealousy consumes me. Inexplicably, insanely, I want to hit him. Something in your body language suggests discomfort. You aren't smiling, your arms are crossed, and it occurs to me that you're trapped in a bad conversation and that for some reason I care. You hold an empty wine glass streaked with the dregs of a red. Part of me urges, go talk to her, save her. The other half screams, you know nothing about this woman, not even her name. You are not that guy. I find myself moving towards you through the grass, carrying a new glass of wine, and when your eyes avert to mine, it feels like some piece of machinery has just seized in my chest, like worlds colliding. As I draw near, you take the glass out of my hand as if you had previously sent me off to get it and smile with an easy familiarity, like we've known each other forever. You try to introduce me to Dylan, but the skinny-jeaned artist makes his excuses and bails. Then it's just the two of us standing in the shade of the hedgerow, and my heart is going like mad. I say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it looked like you might need rescuing. And you say, good instincts. He's pretty but insufferable. I introduce myself. You tell me your name. Daniela. Daniela. I only remember pieces of what was said in our first moments together, mainly how, when you laugh, I tell you how you laugh when I tell you I'm an atomic physicist, but not derisively, as if the revelation truly delights you. I remember how the wine had stained your lips. I've always known, on a purely intellectual level, that our separateness and isolation are an illusion. We're all made of the same thing, the blown-out pieces of matter formed in the fires of dead stars. I've just never felt that knowledge in my bones until that moment there, with you, and it's because of you. Yes, maybe I just want to get laid, but I also wonder if this sense of entanglement might be evidence of something deeper. This line of thinking I wisely keep to myself. I remember the pleasant buzz from the beer and the warmth of the sun, and then, as it begins to drop, realizing how badly I want to leave this party with you, but not having the guts to ask. And then you say, I have a friend whose gallery is opening tonight. Want to come? And I think, I will go anywhere with you. Ampules remaining 1. I walk the infinite corridor, the beam of my flashlight glancing off the walls. After a while, I stop in front of a door like all the rest, one in a trillion. My heart is racing, my palms sweating. There is nothing else I want, just my Daniela. I want her in a way I can't explain, that I don't ever want to be able to explain, because the mystery of it is a perfect thing. I want the woman I saw at that backyard party all those years ago, the one I chose to make a life with, even though it meant giving up some other things I loved. I want her, nothing more. I draw in a breath, I let it out. I open the door. And then this last little piece before I tell you why I really wrote Dark Matter. I think of all the nights I lay in bed, wondering what it might be like if things were different. If I hadn't taken the branch in the road that made me a father and mediocre physics professor instead of a luminary in my field. I suppose it all comes down to wanting what I didn't have, what I perceived might have been mine through a different set of choices. But the truth is I did make those choices, because I am not just me. My understanding of identity has been shattered. I am one facet of an infinitely faceted being called Jason Dessen, who has made every possible choice and lived every life imaginable. I can't help thinking that we're more than the sum total of our choices, that all the paths we might have taken factor somehow into the math of our identity. Thank you. I think a lot of writers start with theme when they write. They seem to know where a book is going, where they're heading, what they want to say at the outset. And I wish I was that kind of writer, but I actually may be too dense to know what's going on right in front of me, both in writing and in life. Over the years, it has become clear to me, or it has been made clear to me, that the books I write are actually therapy in reverse. Only by the time I reach the end do I realize what part of myself, my subconscious, I'm actually exploring. And it's this process of writing, editing, and rewriting that pulls it to the surface. When I wrote Run, for example, I had recently become a father and was struggling with the desire to protect my children no matter what the cost. But the world is far too big and there are too many dangers. So I created an impossible situation for Jack, the hero of the story, and his family, and I let him save the day. In Wayward Pines, I was contemplating the key concepts of Western religion, specifically freedom of choice and predestination. I was raised in the Bible Belt of North Carolina, so yeah, I had some issues and questions. In Good Behavior, I was trying to understand my own values, to define my own concept of right and wrong, and thinking about socially acceptable morality versus human nature. Dark Matter is easily the most personal story I've ever written, as I was desperately trying to make sense of who I was as a person and hold that up in contrast to the life that I was living. If I'm unhappy with who I've become, with the life I'm living, the hard truth is that it's my choices that created this world I found myself in. Our observation creates reality, which means we choose the world we see all around us. We choose our world. It was a painful revelation, but it came with a ray of hope. If we can choose the reality we create around us, the reality we live in, then I can also choose to change it. I can choose another door. See, I was living in regret and nostalgia, blaming myself and those around me for ending up where I had ended up, for what I had become. I had a dream career, literally doing the thing I wanted to do since I was a kid. And over the past years, I'd been so fortunate and had so many doors open to me in terms of pursuing my storytelling in books, TV, and film. But I'm a father of 3. And as my time is more and more in demand, I feel the tension between me, the writer-creator, and me, the father. So with Dark Matter, I wrote a story about a man who faced a similar dilemma, the career track and the family track. It allowed me to explore what effect those choices have on my character, Jason Desson, and in effect on everyone, including me. The writing of Dark Matter freed me. I realized I could be who I wanted. These weren't separate lives I had to live. They were the same life. I just had to decide to be that person. This process of embracing who I really am and having the life I love today was not an easy road. The search for home came with some painful casualties, including my marriage at the time. But today, I get to be the writer I want to be, the father I want to be, and most importantly, the human I want to live the rest of my life as. We have a collection of people in this room who've read this book, a multiverse of differing perspectives. The purpose of this event is to bring the community together, to talk about the same thing from different perspectives. Perspective and experience are what make the different worlds in the box. No matter how different the world is, we're all made of the same stuff, blown out pieces of matter born in the fires of dead stars. Looking around this room, I promise you there are people who have different political ideas than you, people who have different religious beliefs, who have drastically different families and are from different parts of the country, with different educations, different financial situations, but we are all human. We are all made of the same stuff. And we can all choose to be the kind of people we want to be. And just as importantly, we can choose to have the kinds of communities we want to have and that we want to call home. The box works by taking the chemical and psychological setting of those inside it and connecting them to the world that most matches their perception and state of mind at the time. So at the end of Dark Matter, when Charlie chooses the next world, while he is the primary pilot of the box, the thoughts and feelings of Daniela and Jason also influence the world they end up in. In other words, it's their collective thinking that chooses the perfect world for them to live in. I know from my own experience that making choices can help individuals be who they want to be. I also believe that we can, as collective communities, create the world we want to live in. We don't have to be divisive and dehumanizing. We can choose to come together through events like these and be one Broomfield, one Colorado, and one Earth worth living on and fighting desperately for. Just like I discovered that I didn't have to be 2 distinct people and choose one life. It's not binary. Our communities don't have to be one thing or the other. We can have differing opinions, different beliefs, and be one community. It is my sincerest hope that you all choose the life and community you want and keep choosing it over and over, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Thank you for choosing Dark Matter. Thank you for inviting me to your community. Good night. I would love to answer any questions you want to throw at me.
I've always been curious about the 50 other Jasons who were left behind in the original Jason's world And I've wondered, especially the ones who actually went to the power station, they seem to be of a more collaborative mindset than the ones who were the lone wolf hunters. And I know it's the prerogative of an author to say, I'm done, I'm not going to solve that problem, but I've always wondered, what do you think happened to those 50 Jasons?
Can you guys hear me all right? There we go. Yeah, it was a tough choice in the book, leaving those Jasons behind. I like to think that each and every one of them found their way into the box and found a world that was theirs, but I don't think that's reality. I think only one could come out at the end. But no, it was something that I talked a lot about with my editors. It was a big question when it came to starting to work on writing the script. How do you satisfy the audience and not make them think of all these other poor guys that got left behind? And I told myself that at the end of the day, the Jason who deserved Daniela got Daniela. And that's how I sleep at night. But I do think about them.
I had a question, but I've forgotten it. Open the door. I took quantum mechanics about 75 years ago. And I'm sure it's changed a lot since then, but if I'd read your book before I took that course, I got a C in the course. I'm sure I would have gotten at least a B minus. But my question is, this book really scared me. I nearly became an alcoholic reading this book. So I might read it again. But this is one of the few books I read, and I came to the end, and I concluded there might be a good sequel to this book. Do you think so?
I mean, there could be an infinite number of sequels, right? There could be. I've said when I finished the book that I wasn't going to write more about this. I sort of left it all in the field. You know, things change, obviously. I don't have any intention right now of writing a sequel. I'm sure someone out there wants to know what happened to poor Amanda. I could see that being a story. I could see wanting to follow where the Dessens end up after that last door. But I don't know, I think there's also something powerful about not overstaying your welcome in a story and in an idea. I mean, it's not easy because you have to go come up with something else that's equally good, at least plausibly good. You know, when I wrote the Wayward Pines trilogy, that about broke me because it was 3 books. And by the end of the book, I was so tired of Wayward Pines. I was so tired of the characters. I felt like I couldn't escape Wayward Pines. And so I said, you know, I'm done, I'm out. And I going into Dark Matter, I never even wanted to set myself up for, but maybe there could be more. I was like, just nope, there's not going to be more. This is all it's ever going to be. Smash 2 in 2 years. I'll have written a sequel, but probably not.
Well, thank you very much. I won't read it again.
Hello, Blake. I enjoyed the book tremendously, and I understand there's a movie in the making, upcoming in the next year or two.
Fingers crossed. You know, the gears turn very slowly in Hollywood, as I've discovered. But I feel optimistic. I wrote the script.
Awesome.
So it gets, you know.
So
I don't think the author's going to be too upset at the screenwriter.
Right. So would you share with us a little bit about the process in terms of how the book changes into a script and your role in all of this, in the process of making the movie, and choices that you get to make, those kinds of things?
Yeah.
How does that transformation take place?
Well, I'm still,
Thank you.
I'm still learning about it because it's much earlier stages. I've been through the process in a television show from beginning to end twice. Movies are a little different. It's a different ballgame. When we sold Dark Matter, there was a lot of interest from a lot of studios in it, so we made it a point of negotiation that we were not even going to talk to anyone unless I was writing the script. So that was a given from the beginning. And once we did the deal, I had just finished the book and just turned in like the final edit with my editor. And I took about a month off, and then I went straight into writing the script. And I thought it was going to be, I'd written screenplays before and teleplays. I thought it was going to be easier than it was. The problem is when you are approaching a movie like this will be, it's not as simple as just, well, these are the things that happen in the book, so just say it a little bit shorter in a script. You have to decide, well, what kind of a movie are we making? Because there's a version of Dark Matter that is a very straight thriller that doesn't get too much into all of the metaphysical and scientific gobbledygook and just dumbs it down for the audience, which we don't want that to happen. And then there's another version that leans really heavily into the romance, and you really dig into Jason and Daniela, and we spend more time with versions of them than we did in the book. So the process of the screenplay was writing draft after draft after draft. Was, what does this look like as a straight thriller? All right, maybe we skew too hard into thriller. Let's pull in a little more of the emotion. Oh, maybe we did too much of that. Let's just dial those back a little bit. And it's just trying to find that balance. I mean, we're still very early days. We are not into casting or, just beginning to look for a director. So I hope that, in the next year and a half, this makes it to the big screen. But I feel optimistic. I think everyone who I'm speaking with, the producers in the studio, want to make this as great as we can make it. And everyone loves it for the same reason I think that we're all here. And there is something, and I got lucky with this, that stumbling into a very universal idea of the path not taken. There's just something so human about it that connected as well in Hollywood. So I remain very hopeful that we're going to get a great movie out of this.
This is just another on the movie question. Is it going to keep the same title? Because Dark Matter seems to be everywhere now. There's a television series, and in politics, about everybo's talking.
Politics? Wow.
Oh, Lord, yes. People are using metaphors all the time.
Let's go there.
So are you changing the title?
Yes, who knows? I think it'll keep the title. I think it is a popular title in terms of, the scientific definition of what dark matter is. And yes, there's a TV show on Sci-Fi in a few seasons called Dark Matter. I haven't watched it. Yeah, it feels a lot more laser guns and starships, though. No? Okay. I think it will keep the title. Now watch. It'll come back with something really stupid. See, it's dangerous saying all these things. I don't want to watch a video of this 2 years from now just crying at my optimism.
Two questions. First of all, thank you for coming out, and love the books. Really appreciate it. But questions are, what have you read lately that you've enjoyed, and what are you writing next?
I just finished reading the new Andy Weir book called Artemis. He wrote The Martian. I think that's coming out in 2 weeks. It's really good. It's set on the moon. It's this noir thriller. It's pretty brilliant. I just read a galley, which is like an early pre-publication edition of a book called The Gone World by a guy named Tom Sweeterlich, which is mind-blowingly great. I think it's coming out next summer. I just read a book, or blurbed a book called, here's the thing, when you start having a little bit of success, that you start getting tons of books to read, and everybody wants you to like write a blurb and write something nice about it. I mean, I've written plenty of authors and asked them to say nice things about my books, and it's just something you do. And the good news is, often you discover great things before the rest of the world finds out about them. And so this book is called The Wolves of Winter. Boy, I'm bad because I'm blanking on the author's name, but it's coming out, I think, in January. I read those three. I've been reading more science books to kind of go into your next question in preparation for my next book, which I'm hoping to complete a first draft of this month, if all goes well. And this book is called Now, which is the physics of time. And it's by a guy named Robert Mueller. No, Richard Mueller. That's different Mueller. It's a wonderful book about how we think of time and how that's changed over the years. Those are the four that come to mind. I've got a few others on my nightstand that I haven't dug into just yet. No, I wondered if you would push me more. I can't, no, I can't. I don't want to get too specific at all, but I will just say it's very much in the vein of A Dark Matter or A Wayward Pines, and that it's a speculative idea that has a real emotional human heart at its core.
Blake, I'm a pretty avid but slow reader in general, and like a lot of people that gave feedback on this, I burned through this book in like 2 or 3 days. And I was just wondering, when you envisioned the book and when you started it and throughout the process, were you seeing it as kind of going at like kind of that breakneck page-turning scene, or is that something that just developed out of how you were writing it as you went? Thank you. No, I mean, from very early on, I always had a fear of boring the reader. I mean, it kind of goes back to that, even the early stories with my brother. I want to get at that reaction. I want someone to stay up and lose sleep and not do the dishes and just check out of life for a few days while they're reading this book. So it is something, but I don't want, like there's different kinds of fast. There's, runny, jumpy, shooty fast. And those are great, and I love those scenes, and I have them in my books. You can't do that for a whole book. You have to also have fast in that plot things are happening out of nowhere that you never saw coming. That's the kind of fast that I really aspire to. I like to take the reader's hand and lead them down towards what they think is going to happen, because we've seen all these things happen in books and movies before, but then completely subvert it and go a different direction, and then lull them into a sense of, okay, I think I know where this is going, and then take another right turn. So that's the kind of fast that I'm after, if that makes sense. And it is definitely calculated. I never want someone to put my book down because it's not drawing them in.
How about a round of applause for Blake?
Thank you, guys.